Hey, what is going on, everybody? Boilon here, back for another video on Marvel Strike Force. Today, we have the release of Sentinel coming live at 2 p.m. Pacific later on today, and so we have another episode of Should You Core Sentinel Edition. So we have the first character of the Orcus team coming at us today, and we need to answer that question: is Sentinel worth coring for? Now, before we get started with this video, there's a few things that I want to say as to why these videos I think are going to be really important going forward. Some of you may or may not have realized that Marvel Strike Force is going through a new era. We're going through this sort of gotchafication of Marvel Strike Force. And for those of you who are not familiar with the term gotcha, that is basically that we're kind of needing to save our power cores in this sense here to pull for characters that we believe are going to be worth it. Because the way that characters are being released now, and they will be, and I want to stress and let you guys know in advance, there is going to be some communication later on today, and that's why this video is going out a little bit early, regarding Orcus and their release methods. And I will tell you now that it's going to be orbs and milestones. So the release method for this entire team is going to be what we've seen right now for Sentinel, which is this Sentinel Siege milestone that you may have kind of scrolled through, that you've seen that was kind of there from Monday, and also the orbs that are related to this, which is opening the Sentinel factory orb. So this is going to be the primary release method for Sentinel, for Nimrod, and for Omega Sentinel going forward. There is going to be a blog later on today that's going to address that, which you will see. So that means that, you know, understanding which characters are important to unlock early, or even consider getting some shards for early, are going to be really important, and why I'm continuing to do this series here for you guys. So I just wanted to do that kind of preface before we get started with today's video. So if you're ready to go to learn why maybe you should be considering coring for Sentinel, then let's boil this down. Now let's start off with a kind of recap of a Sentinel and Sentinel's kit, because I know that a lot of people don't really pay attention to character kits. I find that until it's closer by the time they're released. So let's go over this together. So Sentinel is a villain global tech protector. He's essentially the tank for the team through his mechanics, and obviously has the Orcus tag. Now his basic attack, let's zoom in 2 more there. Sentinel Blast hits the primary target for 270% damage, applies offense down, but applies counter to self and all Orcus allies. I think that having, and I guess I'll talk about this a little bit later as well, I think having a striker, having Sentinel as a striker, is actually a decent idea, but also Fortifier could be an option as well, given that he is the tank. I find that Fortifier right now is in a pretty good position, because a lot of people are also running, you know, Fortifier for Gladiator, for example, and the purple ISO 2-3 is really good. Like a lot of additional extra barrier, being able to cleanse your own vulnerabilities, that kind of thing. It's actually really good when you consider it in the purple territory. So I think either or would be really good. I think maybe at the lower stars, possibly, I could see Fortifier being used more. I know that, like, we're not in a really good position to be able to use more than one class for purple. So, you know, that's something to keep in mind as well. His special, Neutralize Target. Now, every ability outside the basic does summon more Sentinels, and those are going to be important for his kit, but it's also going to be important for Nimrod, who we're kind of going to briefly talk about. So summon 1 random Sentinel reinforcement ally, attack primary target for 250% damage, plus bonus attack 3 times for 100% damage, and apply defense up for 2 turns and 2 deflect to self and all Orcus allies. And then we'll cover the summons after we go through the kit there. There's 2 different variants of them as well. Some decent damage here on a cooldown of 4. Elimination Protocol, his ultimate, also on a cooldown of 4, which is great because both of them are always going to be up with Scientist Supreme's passive to generate more ability energy on spawn. So summon 1 Sentinel ally, basically of both of them. So the gun ally, the gun version and the sword version. Primary and adjacent targets for 300% damage plus apply offense down. And then he gains 50% damage per reinforcement ally. This is typically going to be up to 5 of them, assuming everyone else is alive. So this could do up to 550% damage total, and you get both of them. And this is unavoidable, so that part's good. It's a pretty basic kit. It's like nothing crazy, and I think that's what's happening more these days, is that a lot of the character kits are easier to swallow, right? Like, it's not, the amount of lines on here are pretty limited, to be honest. So it's easier to understand. On spawn and on, this is passive by the way, on spawn and on revive, summon one random Sentinel reinforcement ally. Now, the revive part would be through things like the Lady Deathstrike passive to bring characters back. Also on spawn. This is good. This is also going to tie into Nimrod's passive, who we're going to talk about very briefly, even though this is not a Nimrod video. And then obviously can summon either two of those minions. And then on this character's first turn, that's really important because it's not on spawn, and he is kind of slow. So this is not going to happen right away. Gain taunt, and then apply, this is probably the most important part, apply safeguard for 2 turns to self and all Orcus allies. And in raids, if this character has 4 or more Orcus allies, enemies cannot gain death proof. Now, what's important about this part, though, is it does include the minions. The minions do also have the Orcus tag. So this may not trigger immediately if you don't have the other team members yet, but over the course of the battle, if you maintain, I suppose, 2 more minions, 2 more summons, then that would activate, right? Because it doesn't count yourself. So it would be Lady Deathstrike, Scientist Supreme, and 2 minions as of now with the characters that we have to activate this part here. So this would only apply, I guess, like kind of post-spawn, I suppose, as well. And the only thing that's a bit strange is that for the tank, he doesn't actually have anything on his kit that adds safeguard, which is strange. You know, like there's nothing in his kit that applies it. So once the 2 turns of safeguard is done, that's it. I don't think there's anyone else that applies safeguard, which I think is a little bit strange given that characters like Sasquatch, just off the top of my head from the last team, and Gore from Annihilators apply safeguard through their skills. So that does not happen through Sentinel. But let's take a look at the minions. So there are 2 minions, 2 variants, obviously, the gun version and the sword version. I believe the gun version is probably the better one because the attack, primary and adjacent targets for 220, but in raids it reduces speed bar by 10% on all of those targets. They also gain taunt. I think they all gain taunt, but I mean, the 10% speed bar is a pretty big thing if you end up getting a lot of these gun versions. And it kind of reminds me of those Ultron bot minions, like the speed version one that does, I believe, 20% to a single target. So that one's quite good there. And then on spawn, when the summons happen, flip all negative effects for self and all Orcus allies. Now, this is really important because anytime, basically, when the Sentinel uses the skills, they're summoning more minions, and therefore also the flipping will happen. So this is really, really good because, you know, when they're being summoned, they're spawning. So in raids, on turn, generate 1 ability energy for a random non-summon tech ally that is not at full energy. And then, so the longer these guys stay alive, the more benefits, obviously. If a Sentinel ally has died and is currently not an ally, it revives the Sentinel and then kills the minion. So there's a lot of ways to bring back the main Sentinel, whether it's through Lady Deathstrike or whether it's through the minions themselves. So that helps too as well. And then on non-summon tech ally turn, they'll speed bar by 5% to the Sentinel minion. Now the sword version, I believe, just does bleeds. Flips 2 positive effects into negatives, so that's okay, I guess, and then applies a bleed. Does a little bit more damage because it's 320 versus 220, but I prefer the speed bar mechanic, so I think that one's probably a little bit better. And I think, is that the same? No, it's different. So only the gun version actually flips the negative stats effects. The sword version applies deflect to everyone. I feel like in every instance, the gun version's actually better, and I think this is pretty much the same thing. Yeah, so they revive the Sentinel and it kills the minion off to do that. So those are the 2 minions, the gun and the sword minion. Now, I also kind of want to briefly touch on Nimrod because I feel like understanding whether or not Sentinel is worth your cores, you kind of also need to understand Nimrod's passive. I'm going to save the rest of it for Nimrod's video, but there's a part in here where it kind of requires Sentinel. So you can use Sentinel by himself, but I feel that Nimrod kind of needs Sentinel to do better. And it's this part here where the gain plus 10% speed for each summoned tech ally up to 50%. And then in raids, it's basically the entire team. So Sentinel gets 1 summon on spawn with him, and then his kit, his skills, will generate more of these allies. And so this is really important for this sort of speed snowball to happen when you do have Nimrod. So this is me saying that I don't think that Nimrod will be as effective if you don't have Sentinel. So this kind of raises the question, well, do I want Sentinel? Do I want Nimrod? I think you might need both, right? And I guess this is kind of giving some things away into the future. I don't know if Omega Sentinel, which is the last character who's being released, because the order is going to be Sentinel, sorry, Sentinel, Nimrod, and then Omega Sentinel. I don't think Omega Sentinel is going to be as required as these two are together on the Orcus team. So I think that they're both going to be important, but I think that Nimrod kind of needs Sentinel to be good in a lot of ways because this won't activate otherwise. And so what I'm saying is that yes, Sentinel is going to be very important for the rest of the team to function. Safeguard aside and all this stuff aside, it's the speed that you're going to get later on from Nimrod, which I think is going to be super important. Let's talk about his gear, though, I think, as part of the video as well. So he does. Oh, where is. Oh, I'm zoomed in too far. Yeah, that's what happens. So on the side here, you can see the gear inspector there. All of the Orcus characters are three gear pieces now. It was like prior to them being released, it was actually like four, but now it's three, and that's fine. And his unique is Hammer Tech. So you may have some of this already, especially if you purchased into the Panda Pool Strike Pass. I have a lot of this stuff. I don't know where it all came from. Maybe I haven't upgraded any Hammer Tech character to G19. Ares is also a Hammer Tech character, and there is a second Hammer Tech character. I believe it might be, I think it's Omega Sentinel, because I believe that Nimrod is infinite energy. So I think it's Omega Sentinel that is also Hammer Tech. So do keep this in mind. However, if you have lots of this, then it should be no problem to upgrade to G19 if you so desire, if you so wish to do that. Also, he has a resistance unique piece, which is great because you very rarely get to use resistance and armor pieces on characters. So I'm actually really happy with the type of like which slot it is for the equipment. It's usually that doesn't matter that much, but when it comes to armor and resistance, characters almost never get to use that. So I did want to bring that up as a special point for Sentinel. And now this is a very quick aside as well. I did want to talk about Lady Deathstrike's kit and how this is going to synergize a little bit with Sentinel if you decide to core for him. Because Lady Deathstrike's ultimate has this part here where if this character has 3 or more Weapon X or Orcus allies, this attack cannot be countered. And like I said about the Sentinel minions, they do count as Orcus allies. So if you do have a Scientist Supreme, Sentinel, and one of Sentinel's minions, then this part of the ultimate is going to get activated, which allows the ultimate to go across the field without being counterattacked. And this is going to be really important because I don't know if you've had the chance to use Lady Deathstrike in the Orcus raid, maybe standalone or with Scientist Supreme right now. A lot of the characters have counterattack, or you end up being forced into, say, Sasquatch, and Sasquatch has a counterattack mechanism. And so by having this allows you to be able to kind of circumvent that, which is pretty good as well. So I think that for me personally, if I had to ask, am I going to core for Sentinel? The answer is yes. Now, if you see how many cores that I do have, I'm currently sitting on about 4,700. By the time he gets released, I'm kind of doing this a day early. I'll have about 5,200 or things like that. But there's another reason, which I alluded to towards the beginning, why I will be as well. And the question comes down to, do you want to wait 4 weeks or more to get Sentinel unlocked? So how much do you care about your PvE raid progress is what I'm asking, essentially. And I think from a more free-to-play perspective, I think this is important. I think that PvE is some of the most important stuff for free-to-play players, and especially raids, because raids is going to dictate how much resources you're going to be getting on a regular basis. And so I will say that of the Orcus characters, I think Sentinel and Nimrod are going to be the most important of the new characters. I don't think, from what I've seen, I personally don't think that Omega Sentinel is going to make or break things. That's just my thoughts anyways. And so that's why, for me, the answer is yes. I think that you should core for Sentinel. And I think that, if you're going to core for anyone, it's going to be for him, because Nimrod doesn't really function entirely without having Sentinel. So, if you're going to wait on one character, I suppose it would be Nimrod, I think, in that kind of suggestion there. And like I said, I am not looking forward to the announcement that's going to happen later. This video is going out early, but later on today, you are going to see some communication come out by Boundless and Scopely about the release methods of Orcus. And it's basically going to confirm everything that I've been talking about in the last while, is that this is the new norm that we're in. That waiting about a month or more is going to be the new normal, and the Orcus method the release method for the team is going to be entirely on these orbs and milestone. And as of recording this video, I do not know what the Sentinel orb is going to look like. The Sentinel factory orb, I don't know how bad it is. Is it as bad as the Gladiator orb? I don't know. Maybe there's some guaranteed shards in there. I hope that's the case. But nonetheless, I would say that given the fact that Tolerance's extinction, which is happening today, is going to be the first look into getting Sentinel shards, there's only about like 12. Oops, only about 12 of these Sentinel factory orbs that you could possibly get at a maximum. So let's just hypothetically say that there's like 2 guaranteed shards in these orbs, right? So you might be looking at like 20 to 25 shards per week, essentially. And so the question is, how fast do you want them? Like, if you can build Sentinel now, I would spend the course to do so. If you don't have the resources to upgrade them, then maybe think about like 50 shards. That way you're still kind of shaving off like 2 weeks worth of time towards unlocking Sentinel. So I think a lot of it comes down to, do you have the resources to build them now? If you do, I would totally unlock them. If you don't, then you could maybe spend some cores for them. There are no power core events coming in the next 2 weeks. So unfortunately, there is no double dipping on this front of things. But that's just my thoughts and my conclusions on Sentinel. Let me know what yours are in the comments down below. So I give it the Boilon checkmark, but with a caveat of, do you have the resources to build him or not? If you do, I would go ahead and do this. If you don't, you could consider spending less cores and maybe doing it over a longer period of time. I think these core orbs will stay available for some time as well, because we still have the Gore and the Thanos orbs still in the game. So I think that because those milestones actually contain the core orbs as some of the rewards from the milestone, that the orbs will probably be sticking around for a little while longer. So there's no huge rush. Just depends on, do you have the resources to upgrade them now if you unlock them or you get lucky. So that's it for now for this video on Sentinel. Should you core? Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if there's anything that you would want me to include in the video, though, for next time when we do Nimrod. Otherwise, until next time, stay safe and healthy, and I'll see y'all later. Boilon signing out.